Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. Each week, I invite you to sit in on a conversation with a new guest where we get level, bringing you real people, real issues, and real conversations. My hope is that you walk away from the show inspired and equipped to level up in your own life and leadership and walk away with a gem or two, which I know you will today. If you'd like a copy of the best of notes and quotes from the show, please subscribe to my email list at louisehreed.com. Now let's jump into the gem of a guest we have today. Today we have with us Rob Statham. Rob is a wine and beer professional who started his career in this field over 8 years ago. At the time, Rob had closed up an IT solutions company he had and was actively pursuing project management. During a visit with his now late father, it was suggested that he get into the wine and beer field due to his extensive hospitality background. Rob grew up with his father making wine and beer, something he was really passionate about. His dad owned and read numerous books on the subject, including the original book by Michael Jackson, The World Guide to Beer, as well as books on the history of wine. Seems it was somewhat in the blood. Since that night, Rob has gone on to become a certified a French wine scholar. There's all sorts of these other words that Rob has kindly given me to read about. I don't even know what they mean. So I'm sorry, Rob, I'm leaving those parts out. This is for like the very average Joe. And he is a beer sommelier. He's currently working on completing his Italian wine scholar, having passed Unit 1 amidst many personal challenges, some of which I am aware of, and I can speak to his resilient nature, and he's done that with highest honors. Rob is currently the owner of The Drunken Grape, a video branding and events company focusing on helping wineries, breweries, and distilleries enhance their marketing presence, as well as sales online, especially given the current climate under the pandemic. Rob, my friend, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you very much for having me, Louise. This is great.
You're so welcome. I love wine and I love everything that you do and everything that you put out. So why would I not want to spend this time with you?
Well, thank you. It's awesome.
So you have a lot of insights and information on everything wine and beer. I'd love to focus our conversation. I know it'll go all over, but I would really love to maybe start talking about women in wine, a topic I know that you know a lot about. So I'm going to start off with some really easy questions because I'm just curious.
No, great.
Okay?
That's cool. Go ahead.
No, super easy here because I'm just curious. So from what you know, and what you've experienced, who are the majority of wine drinkers? Is it men? I mean, is it women? Are women more wine drinkers than men?
Well, I think wine is a choice of alcoholic beverage that women naturally gravitate to more. Having said that, I don't necessarily think it's really more either way. My experiences in wine, that's a drink that's pretty balanced amongst men and women. I mean, you go to a wine show, for instance, and you're going to see an equal number of women to men in these trade show events or on-trade events, or like it could be like the Californian wine show or the New Zealand wine show, for instance. There's always quite a healthy balance between men and women at these shows. It's not like beer where it's definitely more male driven, or the Ottawa Whiskey Show, some of the shows we have in this area that reflect a little more, I would say, of a male presence. Wine definitely tends to bring out more women, but it is also a drink that women tend to gravitate to. But there's a lot of men that really enjoy wine too.
So I read somewhere, and I want you to tell me if this is a myth or not. I read somewhere that women tend to have a more refined sensory palate than men. Is this true?
I wouldn't say that's necessarily true. I think really palates get refined by training and developing them over time.
So all the practicing all the wine drinking practice that I'm doing is actually good because I'm honing my palate. Yes.
Well, if it's done in an educated, trained format, it will. Okay. It's like anything else. It's you gotta remember your olfactory system, which is up around your soft palate and through the nose, is about 85 to 90% of taste. And all humans have that within equilibrium. Yeah.
Okay, so educate me here. How can I, as a wine lover, but definitely not a connoisseur, how can I start to intentionally train this? Or do I need to go take a course?
There are courses. You can take 1-day courses with like the WSET. They're level 1. I think it's like 1 or 2 days. It covers the basics and the intro to wine. I know my friend Jennifer Simonati Bryan, she's a master of wine, has a terrific program for beginners entering the wine world as well, or just the aficionado that just wants to enjoy it at their leisure. I mean, and that's really probably about 99.9% of the wine world, of people who just enjoy drinking wine. They're not the trained professionals in that. It's a global product, and it really has impact on everybody.
It does. Master of Wine, that's a designation or a certification or something?
Yeah. So the MW is, I think to date, there's maybe 380 of them since the Institute of Masters of Wine was founded in 1959, somewhere around that date, out of London, England. And really, they are your highest level academic think tank in the world of wine. And there's a few of them that definitely have a very strong presence, not only academically speaking, but into the business of wine worldwide as well. And, you know, we've seen an explosion of women into this bracket, which I think is great. Before, you know, I think it was probably just too male dominated and too heavy that way. And we've seen some key figures like Yancis Robinson, for instance. She writes the World Atlas of Wine. She's a huge authority. Sometimes she writes articles in the Globe and Mail. And this is a woman who has a presence across the globe. She's the cellar master for Queen Elizabeth II. I mean, you can think about some of the things here. She's the one who makes the wine picks for the Queen.
Wow.
And yeah, so these are the people that are really at the zenith of it. You're going to hear Master Sommelier. That's at the zenith of the restaurant side. I mean, they've got the toughest service. They got perhaps one of the toughest exams in the world as far as the service side is concerned, but certainly not on the academic and knowledge side like a Master of Wine. I mean, the level there is like this. So
fascinating.
It's, I mean, these are really difficult designations to get. Yeah, absolutely. It is.
It's interesting, isn't it? Like anytime you start to peel back the layers of any industry that you don't know much about, it's like it's a whole new world. It's a whole, whole new world.
Absolutely.
You mentioned that we've seen an explosion, or you've seen an explosion of women in the wine industry. What do you attribute that to? Why the explosion?
Well, I think wine is something that naturally attracts women. Women tend to really enjoy it. I know in the case of my friend Jennifer Simonati Bryan, we had a podcast. She was a banker. She was actually had a 6-digit income in the world of banking. I can't remember which bank she worked for, but she was invited to a luncheon one day where it was like a guided tasting with dinner. And she talked about that. And it was that dinner with the wine tasting and how it was presented that inspired her to ditch her 6-digit career and pursue the wine world.
How cool is that?
I think it's very cool. I think because the MW is intrinsically academic, I find also academia is more embracing of openness, and it always has been, because, you know, they think along the terms of brain power, not really sexes or races or religions, and a lot of the biases, unfortunately, that we're conditioned with. And because it's so academic, it opened up a lot more to invite a good cross spectrum of the sexes in. I'm sure it needs some work still to find a bit better of a balance moving forward, but definitely we've always seen in academia, it's usually one of the first places where the barrier gets broken open, the stride starts, and then it just moves from there. And wine is a heavily academic subject, as is beer.
As is beer. Yeah, I'm not a beer fan, very much a wine fan, although I live with someone who is a huge beer. Oh my gosh, I don't even know what you call a fan. He's more than a raving fan of beer. A fanatic he is of the craft beer industry, which has had a really interesting explosion itself.
It has, and it's another field where you're seeing a lot more women brewers coming along, studying brewing, the science of brewing, and then becoming head brewers in places, you know, becoming important cogs in the wheel of major brewing operations. And that's the cornerstone of it. And which is great because beer is opposite to wine. Wine throughout history has largely been male dominated, whereas beer has been largely female dominated.
Really?
You know, beer started out, I mean, there's a debate whether it started in China, where they found beer crystals and deposits some 7,000 years ago, or the Tigris-Euphrates River Valley, which is where ancient Mesopotamia and Babylon is, and ancient Sumer. So the ancient Sumerians, the first known recipe ever found is written in cuneiform writing. So it's like a picture form of writing on tablets. And it's in honor to the goddess Ninkanchi, who's the goddess of beer. And it's a song and a poem and a recipe all in one. It's actually the first documented recipe in human recorded history in tribute to a female goddess of brewing. And when you think about it, beer was likely discovered by women as part of a cooking activity. You know, you left bread out overnight with some water, it's raining, some airborne yeast attacks the sugars and the grains. Next thing you know, you have this alcoholic, weird, strange beverage that appeared. And you know, they used to make it with breadcrumbs. It was called bapur and flavored with honey. And it was a part of a home cooking activity, largely because water was also unsafe to drink in most societies up to the 20th century. I mean, it's only recent. And even in then, it's probably half the world can't just turn on the water taps like we can in Canada and take it for granted that you can get a fresh glass of water for you that's safe to drink and healthy. Where in the case of preventing illness from drinking bad water, you create this low alcohol beverage, very low alcohol, but it was chock full of B vitamins and all sorts of other healthy things in it that they would drink to nourish them as well as hydrate them. And women were responsible for that.
Look at all these things I'm learning. That is so
It's
cool.
fascinating.
It is fascinating. What great stories. Where do you see opportunity for, like, the major opportunity or greatest opportunity for women in the wine industry?
Well, I'm seeing a lot of them just appear at all levels.
Okay.
You're seeing a climb of women at the Master of Wine level, women finishing their diplomas, women taking trade, like on trade premises and sales roles and being very active in them. I think you're starting to see a lot of women winemakers. I mean, I think of Laura Catina of Catina Wines, Catina Zapata Wines in Argentina. She largely put Malbec and the Mendoza region on the map for Argentina. And this is a female winemaker that is prolific. And I mean, she's a very gifted individual. I believe she's got a medical degree from Harvard, and graduated cum laude as well. So this is somebody that has enormous talent. And on the winemaking side, she's just been incredible. Like, you're seeing figures like this pop up everywhere. And it's not without history. I mean, if you go back into the world of champagne, in around the time of Napoleon, at the end of the 18th century into the early 19th century, the French Revolution, along appeared Barbe Nicole Pochardin, which is Madame Veuve-Clicquot. And she was the first one to develop a clear style of champagne, used to be cloudy. So what she developed was the method of riddling and disgorgement. So in the second fermentation, you'd remove the yeast deposits. So you'd have this clear and very presentable wine. She was also one of the first to develop, I mean, wine was typically sweet then. She was one of the first to develop a drier style. And she was the first to really export champagne internationally and global. She was a global powerhouse. And this is at a time where the only way women could come into these roles is if their husband died and they were widowed, which is exactly what happened to her at the age of 29 in 1805. And she didn't just take a wine business that was already doing well. She completely revolutionized it and revolutionized the industry. So, I mean, you go far back, you have all kinds of female mavericks, and she was probably the largest one in the modern age to really penetrate through at that time, which was, you know, I don't like to use political terms, but it's definitely like it was a very patriarchal society. And she didn't just enter it, she became the apex predator within it. I mean, this is this is crazy and
It is
incredible.
crazy. It is, because even, now in 2020, that's hard to do. It would have been exponentially harder back then.
Without question.
Exponentially.
Without question.
So I would like to say thank you to her for declouding champagne and for bringing it internationally, because I'm a huge fan.
Yeah, for sure. And if you think about it, she really opened up women to the world of wine and possibility. I think it's through her that you started to see more and more women afterwards enter the wine field and become more and more prominent along the way.
Wow, that's pretty powerful.
She was a catalyst. She was a catalyst to key change.
Yeah, pretty powerful statement. Pretty powerful woman. That's for sure. So I know I would love to just continue to talk about women in wine, and I know we'll end up going back there, but do you mind if we jump into a little bit about you, because I realize you made this change a little later, not later in life, but this wasn't your first choice, midlife. But as an aside, when did you start saying you were midlife?
Well, I was
how are we midlife? How is this?
I'm in my 40s now. I guess it just goes by ingrained scientific life expectancy. I still feel young and nimble, but it's just chronologically, I think that's where that comes. But yeah, so for me, entering the wine world, I grew up with my father making wine and beer. He was very adamant. He was prolific. He always liked making his home brews and his concoctions. And he read an awful lot about the subject. So this is going back, like you said in my intro, just talking about the biography. It was 9 or 9.5 years ago. I'm just trying to think of timelines now. It's probably 9.5 years ago, getting near 10. So it might even be longer. I was 39 at the time. He was looking at me saying, I know that you had the IT company and you had a less than scrupulous partner that, robbed you and robbed a lot of stakeholders, and you got out of it and you wanted change. At the time, I was looking at project management because it was very transferable for what I was doing in the world of IT. And it's something that I was interested in. But I thought about it, and, I was giving length of thought about it. And the problem was at the time is, you get your PMP designation, which is the North American standard, to Prince 2, which is European. The market was already starting to get flooded with people doing this certification process. And that was actually one of my concerns. So I came over to my dad's house one night. My stepmother were having dinner. And my father looks at me and he says, if I were to do it all over again, I don't know if I'd even stayed in the military near as long, but I would have definitely moved into the wine world. He said, that's something you should do. You have a lot of hospitality experience, and that stemmed from my time in the cruise line industry. And I looked at him and I said, maybe you're onto something. So I started exploring it more and more and more, and realized as one market was getting a bit suppressed, and that was the PMP market, the wine world was opening up. And I'm a huge history fan. I love wine, but I knew very little about it in the beginning. I thought everything tastes like olives and tomatoes and on red wine. And it was funny because even the teacher said that to me. So I just stayed with it and persisted because I found the subject an awful lot of fun. I knew coming into class, it wasn't, even if the material can get heavy, and it can get very heavy as you get advanced in these courses, there's still always that underlying belly that wine brings joy and happiness to people. And that was something that really stuck and resonated with me. And it just sort of fit, and ended up fitting the mold of my character a lot better. And, sometimes you don't realize that. And when we're younger, we like to think that our parents get in the way of what we want to do. But in truth, it's the first time I really listened to them hardcore on that whole aspect and followed it, and it really worked out.
What a cool story, and thanks for sharing that. And going along the lines for a second about, I think it's interesting what you said about sometimes when we're younger, or often when we're younger, we think our parents are actually getting in the way, but sometimes they can see, they've already been through what we've been through, and can see the light before we even have to go through the darkness. But we tend to go through the darkness first, don't we? My mom said the same thing for me when I was looking to study at university. She said, I know you, Louise, and gave me a little bit more of a story and said, as a result, I think you should study psychology. Didn't do that. And what do I want to get my master's and PhD in now? Psychology. Anyway, yeah, she could have expedited that for
and you
me.
know what? Knowing you, I think you'll do fantastically well. I think that field for you is going to come fairly naturally. I know you're going to work really hard at it. And I could see you going right to the top of that. And it's funny because they see innately in us what we either refuse to see or can't see.
Yeah.
And I kind of see that now with nieces and nephews. I don't have any children of my own, but I have an army of nieces and nephews. I can't remember what the number is, 13 or something like that at last count directly. But but you see as they develop and you start talking to them when they're teenagers and they start, thinking and talking to you in very unrealistic terms. And now you can see where the parents sat with you, because in reality, they had infinitely more experience and wisdom and insight, because they've been alive a lot longer and hit those challenges that you're just starting to face or we all did at a young age. So no, it's definitely a lesson well learned for sure.
It is. And what a great story, because obviously your father has passed on since, providing you that guidance. What a way for his legacy to have lived on, even though that wasn't the intention in you going into it, yet it has been, so.
It is. It's funny in a sense. It's true because, he was a military officer. So my brother's fulfilled going into the military and the family history. And then I went into another side of it that he enjoyed.
Yeah, I love that. I think
I didn't really actually think of it in those terms until now. So, but it's very, very true.
It is. It's like a lot
Very
of your
true.
dad is living on in you beyond the DNA, but just what it is that you're sharing with the world, the love that he had, you're continuing to share in a different way. I know that you have been through a lot of personal and professional obstacles, and none of us go through life without facing them.
That's true.
And I think that what we really learn from is through being able to dust ourselves off and continuing and persevering. What's the biggest obstacle that you've had to overcome? And more importantly, no, not more importantly, what I'm interested in really digging into is, how did you continue to put one foot in front of the other and carry on and remain, well and productive and functioning well and thriving?
Yeah, well, I think, losing my dad was tough. I don't think any challenge was tougher than losing my twin sister back in July, at the end of July. We just got over a year of that, and it's always difficult to think about it. I had a lot of starts and stops, and I don't know what it is with the wine scholar courses, but with the French wine scholar, I had to defer the exam and the course for another year initially because my father got sick and he passed. And then I had to, push it back just ever so slightly one more time because my sister at the time got diagnosed with cancer. And writing the Italian, the same thing happened. So I got up to it, was about to write the exam last year, and then my sister got hit with that cancer for the second time, which ultimately took her life. So there was a lot of starts and stops, especially in business and in these courses. And at times, you feel like the world's a little overwhelmed. There was times where I didn't want to quit, but I just didn't know where I wanted to go next. Mm-hmm. And I sat back and I said, no, they want me to stay on the course I'm on and to keep putting that one foot in front of the other, which is, I got through it. And my most recent challenge was doing the Italian wine scholar exam. 8 days before the exam, my stepmother got in a car accident and broke her hip in 2 places. And at the time, we didn't know she needed a surgery. And add in this of the loss of my twin sister. And then 8 or 9 months later, it was the loss of my mother at the end of April from a 10-year battle of Lewy body dementia. Thank God it wasn't COVID, because she would have suffered. She had a peaceful way out, and I'm very grateful for that. My stepmother, who's like my second mother, gets into a car accident. And I'm just thinking at first, my God, when's the circus going to end?
Yeah. And
at the time, I was getting heavily prepared for my exam. And I contacted the school, and I think they misinterpreted what I said. They wouldn't give me an extension because it wasn't beyond 10 days. So I was naturally livid, and I naturally also got aggressive on the studying. And I said, I'm just going to bury this one. I'm going to try. And the morning of, I remember I called in because you do not a Zoom call, but it's proctored online. And these exams have like a 60, 70% fail rate for those who write them.
Wow.
So the dropout rate is really high.
Wow.
And I went and I wrote it. But at first I said to the proctor, I said, you know how upset I am about what had happened, because, you know, I've had all this family tragedy and you guys threw dirt on me. You wouldn't even give me a budge of a slight extension. And then, of course, she went right back offline for a minute, talked to the head of the wine school, one of the founders at the Wine Scholar Guild. And they came back to me and said, oh my God, whatever time, you know, if you write this exam and you fail it, we're not going to count it. We're actually going to give you a free one. I'm sorry, we were terrible in dealing with you. And I looked at them and said, yes, you were actually, quite frankly, but we got over that. But I ended up writing it in 19 minutes and 32 seconds. I wrote an hour exam that has 100 questions. I ended up with 92%.
Nice.
And I hammered it out of the park. And that made me realize all the frustrations and the challenges I'd faced for the years going through these courses, even doing beer courses, the same headaches of, you know, family getting sick, family death. It's kind of repeating itself. That really showed, it was a culmination of keeping the course and staying forward and moving forward. It just sort of re-cemented that in my head. And I know that they're looking over my shoulder, you know, and wherever they are, and I can feel the blessings of them sometimes. And they want the rest of us to do really, really well. And that's what anything out of a foundation of love is going to want that.
Beautifully, beautifully said. And I've said it to you already previously in other conversations, but truly sorry for all of those losses, and what pride they all will have in you, and seeing how you've really harnessed those tragedies, the energy around that in a positive way, because there's nothing positive about those situations, clearly.
No,
you didn't allow that to it took them down. It didn't take you down along with them, which is the last thing that they would have wanted.
It is, and I know you've gone through a fair bit too, and it's the same. We both realize that, and it's you realize time's finite on this planet, and you might as well, you got to seize every day. It's the old Latin saying of carpe diem, seize the day, and it's so absolutely true. And you think about it, you know, there's a post I either reshared or commented on. I reshared it on Facebook today, but it essentially says, you know, people work 50 years to retire. The average lifespan is 78, which means the retirement age is 67. So you got 11 years to enjoy your retirement. And the moral of it is, you don't know if you're going to get there. So enjoy each and every day along the way in the journey. And that was really part of the embrace in my thinking back. I'm blessed that I'm in a field that I love. It ties in a lot of things I've learned along the way, you know, especially presenting and the entertainment side of being an assistant cruise director and an art auctioneer on cruise ships where you're in front of people all the time. And it's the love of that also helped keep me in line.
Yeah.
Because you know as well as I, the challenge of being an entrepreneur, especially where we're based, where, you know, it's a civil servant public sector factory. It's not a business-minded city in the city of Ottawa at all. So we're always bombarded with some of these hurdles and challenges just on the exterior. So when you get hit with these internal challenges, which are far tougher, it really is ultimately love of family, but love of what you do as well that carries you through it. Otherwise, I don't think you'd have, or I would have, personally, I would never have had the stamina to survive what I went through otherwise.
It's such an interesting comment, and like totally bang on. Love carries you through. And to your point, I think it's love. You were saying love of family and love of what you do. A much lighter example compared to what you just shared. But I'm a year into writing my leadership book, and I'm
Fantastic.
editing. Oh my gosh!
Good for you.
Thank you. It's a journey, I tell you. So my editor has gone through it once, and so now I'm just editing the manuscript of her edits. My point in saying this to you is that the love for what I do is carrying me through this. It is not the joy of the process. That's for sure. Not right now.
Yeah.
Right?
And I can relate to that fully. And it's,
yeah.
And you know, and I know the passion you share for helping people, and the leadership you want to bring, and the guide you want to show people that they can just do really well. And particularly in the women's space of women entrepreneurship and development. And I have no doubt that the book's going to be great. And
Thank you.
But you're right, though. The only thing that really keeps us sane and focused is that, because you're often swimming through a sea of insanity. I mean, in your case, you have you know, what is it, 2 or 3 children, a husband. It's 4 children,
4
even
boys.
bigger. 4 boys. That's 5, including Jay. But it's just, that's an army, and that in itself is a full-time engagement. So to add your full-time business life to it, yeah, if you don't have passion and love for it, you're not going to survive it.
You don't. And I have to say at this time, because I feel like I want to say 2 things. I want to acknowledge you for your leadership and support of women in an industry that you're in. I think that we need to celebrate the men who support women, who are active in supporting women, because that's only going to be, until or unless you are willing to share the space, it's not going to happen. So I want to acknowledge you for that, and thank you for, you know,
No, you're very welcome. It's, you know, having a twin sister and growing up in a complete equilibrium that way, it's just, intelligence and talent have nothing to do with sex or race or background. We all have it, and it comes in equal measures in different ways. And I think that's something that just has to be realized. And the first societies that really embrace that kind of mindset are the ones that are going to leap forward the most.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's part of really managing human resources. If you work to maximize the capabilities of your entire population, you do great. I mean, that's part of the reason why Israel as a little nation, for instance, has done so well in such a tense climate it's currently situated in. In Israel, just to give you an example, the women learn how to fight. They fly jets just like the men. They run tanks. They build. They're mechanics, engineers, doctors, professors. I mean, everything is on because that society depended on it for survival. Everybody does its part because you only have 4 million Israelis living in a climate where they're surrounded by 100 million people that don't necessarily agree with them being there in that region. It's an extreme illustration of it, but what it does illustrate on the human level is when you maximize your human resources and you're no longer biased or sexist in it, it rolls a lot better. I mean, there's a reason why that nation's a superpower for its size. And I think that's the root element right there, is they embrace women just as much as men in leadership, in business, in trades, in public service, everything, because they have to.
Because they have to. Let's leave that, leave that part out of it, although that is true. But then the outcome is that it's a better outcome.
Yes, and that's what we have to learn from it. They had to out of necessity, but the reality is it's not necessity. It's just common sense to embrace that mindset moving forward. And it's true because I remember my sister even saying to me, and my late twin saying numerous times, you know, it's so much easier for you to be born a guy. You know, you can just walk out and do what you want. And, you know, you're just physically bigger and stronger. People don't harass you the same way. You don't have to put up with a lot of the same nonsense. And I saw it firsthand, and I'm just like, yeah, this is true, and this sucks, and you shouldn't even have to go through that just because you're female. I mean, it's just wrong. It doesn't have any logic to it.
It doesn't, but deeply ingrained, and we aren't going to fix that, but we can enjoy wine along the way. So you have refined your palate a lot then through the courses that you have taken. What is your favorite wine? Do you have a favorite? Or a favorite region?
You know, it'd be shocking to hear, probably not really, because you just get exposed to so much that's out there. You know, I would say as far as strict Cab Sauves, I tend to lean towards the higher end Napa wines, you know, with that varietal. Then you can get some fantastic blends out of various parts of the world, whether it be an Amarone out of Valpolicella, or you have, you have a rich Bordeaux. That's a blend typically of 4 different grapes. Riesling's a great wine just because you can go from super dry to super sweet. The range is incredible, but it's a field that you're always learning and developing at. And I don't think it ever ends. It doesn't. It's like scientific inquiry. You know, you can get to a certain level and you realize, wow, this is just the tip of the iceberg, and probably take 1,000 lifetimes just to scratch through the full surface of it.
Which is really cool to hear, because I bet not many people know that about the industry.
No, and they don't realize that. You know, you think international varietals, for instance, everyone's familiar with Chardonnay, Merlot, Cab Sauv, Cab Franc. Pinot Grigio, Sauvignon Blanc. But the reality is they're dominant, but they're just a small little number of at least the 1,300 different varietals on this planet, and growing, because they're discovering them all the time. And it's just incredible. Most people think, oh, well, and then they see an Alicante or whatever. They go, what the hell is that? Or Rioja, what's that? It's just the language is foreign, because on top of that, they are different grapes and they're often indigenous, but they're named after the regions they come from in the old world. They're not named after the varietal as how we do it in the new world. So yeah, no, the public has this perception, I think, that pretty much everything's some variation of Cab Sauv or Cab Franc or Chardonnay or Pinot Grigio. Riesling's tucked to the side and you've got your Sauvignon Blanc. But they don't realize that there's just so many different varietals, as well as some fascinating winemaking techniques out there. It's not just red wine and, red, white, rosé, and champagne. There's sweet wine production, and there's wines that are made from semi-dried grapes. There's, wines that they literally dance on them in a stone basin called the Lageiras, and as in Portugal, with port wine in its traditional sense. They actually have a musical party going on while they're fermenting, helping the batches ferment in an open fermenter. I mean, the list. Have
you seen any of this kind of these more or these less traditional methods? Have you witnessed these?
Well, I mean, I haven't actually seen some of that stuff live. I've seen videos of it.
Yeah.
It's quite interesting, but that's their traditional ways of doing things. And it's not something that people who are not in the wine field, if they're not in the field, they're not familiar with it. But it just goes to show, like leadership in your field, you can go in a million different directions around one focal point and not be wrong. I mean, it'll just take you to a different journey.
Which is, well, it's just fascinating in and of itself. Wow. So you've been in business now for, you said about 9 years? 9 years?
Well, 5 years on my own.
Okay, 5 years.
5 years. So it's coming up to 5 years, this October, just around Thanksgiving in 2020.
That's fantastic. Fantastic. And kudos to you for literally surviving this long, because it's not, surviving is an accurate word, right? Because a lot of businesses don't make it 5 years in. So
no, they make it 1 or 2. I mean, I'm blessed in I'm very fortunate in the sense that it's really largely driven by myself, and I hire out when I have events and things like that. But it's, I don't have brick and mortar, and like yourself, not having brick and mortar makes things a lot more pliable and flexible.
So tell me,
it dramatically increases the survivability of what you're doing dramatically.
Oh, doesn't it? For sure. Obviously from a cost point of view, and then from a love point of view, I think that it gives you, for me, the love of not having brick and mortar is that I can work from wherever I want to work, which is.
Yeah, I know. And that was my goal. Exactly. If I wanted to be in the back of a super yacht, eventually semi-retired, I can have the laptop open and I could shoot a video on the back deck about cognac or whatever I'm drinking in paradise, and just write about it and bring it to life to the public, much the same as if I was in my own backyard here in Ottawa doing so. Similar
visions in that regard. And very much once COVID has passed, very much possible in our world today. And certainly with the explosion of remote work, which I think we will continue to see more of than pre-COVID.
Absolutely.
Tell us a little bit about who would hire you and what kind of engagement that would look like. Because I'm curious to know. I read in your bio, the Drunken Grapes, a video branding and events company focusing on helping wineries, breweries, and distilleries enhance their marketing presence as well as sales online. So it sounds good. Tell me who would hire you and what that looks like.
Well, often it's owner-led operations that are small to mid-size that do. I find the ones that are mid-size and bought out are more bureaucratic, and then they sort of want to nickel and dime you or challenge you, and it's kind of a pain to deal with, quite frankly. I'm just talking in blunt business terms here. And I'm sure you laugh because you know it's true, but when you deal with operations where it's owner-led and the ownership is built, they have the root passion and vision that will never be there with caretakers that take the business over. It just doesn't happen. So they tend to be the people who gravitate towards me because they see, well, here's someone who's out on their own and, you know, throwing the spear every day to try to catch the next contract or the meal ticket because you have to. And they're just as passionate as I am as trying to move the needle. So that automatically opens up a doorway for conversation. It's funny because the video part started by me doing TV spots for a company called Groovy Grapes. And I left them because they just weren't sure what they wanted to do at the time. I think they pretty much shut shop, but they wanted to close shop, and they offered me a franchise possibility to take it over. And just mathematically, it made no sense. And on a financial level, it made more sense just for me to go my own way, start my own thing and build it up. So I started doing videos for them through TV spots, and it flew very well. And I still do those TV spots today on Daytime Ottawa, just not as often as I used to. It's more like 3-4 times a year now instead of monthly. But that translated eventually into video. So when I got onto LinkedIn, I realized I had a better platform, a great platform to do these videos. And a lot of them start out and you look back at your early work, it's quite rudimentary as to where it eventually goes. But it was a struggle, I tell you, for a long time. And, you know, I don't know what the mindset of Canadian business can be difficult in a lot of ways. And it's not like the States where they just grab it and embrace it. Certain climates and cultures are just more open to these types of things. So in the Canadian climate, a lot of Ontario wineries were happy to have me down there and talk about it, but to get actual paying gig outside of them supplying product and putting a roof over your head to do so was tough. And they always use the excuse of, well, we're doing it in-house. And I'd always tell them, well, that's a bad plan, because if you do it in-house, it looks like a sales and marketing pitch. Now, it doesn't look like an endorsement. And the person doing the video usually knows nothing about wine. They're about 22 years old, and you've handed the keys of social media marketing to someone who doesn't even understand how to do that properly, you know, and they don't even understand the market properly. So the projects end up getting failed and they just get thrown to the dirt, and they forget about it until next February when they start discussing sales and marketing in the heat of the winter, the deadest points when they do all their planning, because the growing season comes along with the good weather, right? So they're focused on that. Well, COVID hit. And, you know, I had some hits and contracts before COVID, but COVID really opened a door of huge opportunity for me. The other side I did was events. So I'd be brought in to do events corporately, whether for law firms, a dental clinic, a medical office, or high-tech companies and conferences. And that one's pretty self-explanatory. You'd either get up and guide them through a wine region and you do a wine tasting with it, or you just have a food pairing, or you'd have a wine and beer station where they'd come in and you'd educate them about the wine and beer they're drinking as you're serving it to them. That obviously got killed with COVID. I mean, that's probably not going to come back anytime soon. I'm now moving towards the virtual way of doing things because I've been approached on it. And I've had customers and potential clients say, hey, listen, are you willing to do this to move things forward? And I said, well, sure. You know, let's look at Zoom calls and virtual wine tastings. So that's in the works, but the video side definitely lifted. These wineries lost, in some cases, up to 90% of their business due to COVID because they relied on all the local restaurants and on-premise business, going into hotels, the golf courses, the summer wedding hall season. All that has just been thrown off the table. So all of a sudden, they're now all looking for help and branding presence. And that's where the video part has really taken off. So, you know, if there's listeners listening in on this that own wineries, breweries, or distilleries, or know friends who do, this is definitely a service that will help lift them. And in the meantime, I've developed a strong following on social media that gravitates to it. And a lot of people within key figures in the wine world or the beer world or the distilling world, they can help these people move their products to different territories as well. So it's actually a great way to open doors for global business.
Oh, it's fantastic. Kudos to you for choosing to see the opportunity in COVID as well, because some individuals have had a harder time than others, some because of the very industry that they're in, brick and mortar. That can be a bit harder, but still it's a mindset. Still it comes to a mindset, right? It still is a mindset. We talked about that earlier. So again, kudos to you for that. Like that's a necessary quality in an entrepreneur, right? Resilience and a growth mindset, willingness to adapt.
And you have to do things. I mean, in the process of building a business, a lot of us still have to work part-time somewhere else, or you still have a job full-time to do somewhere else. And you know, you nailed it. It really is perseverance with passion and drive and determination. In the end, it's not the smartest that gets there often, or the most talented or the most educated. It was the most determined that didn't quit running the race.
Oh my gosh, isn't that true? Isn't that true? I have a coach who was telling me kind of the same, it's kind of not. It's going to go into another area that I wanted to explore a tiny bit, and that's about fear. She was talking about a time she was a little girl. She was doing the egg and spoon race. And do you know the egg on the spoon? Did you ever do that when you were a kid?
Yeah, no, I think I did that as a kid. I'm trying. You got the spoon. You got to run. You can't.
You can't drop.
It's like the potato sack. It's as difficult as the potato sack.
Yes.
Try running without hopping, without falling over.
Exactly. Yeah. So you know what? It could have been that, whatever. But it happened to be an egg and spoon race. And so she is out in front. She doesn't know this at the time, but she looked behind her because she was afraid that, oh my gosh, where is everyone else? Have I done something wrong? Am I, it was that questioning of herself and fear creeping in. She looked around, and as she looked around and behind her, she dropped her egg. And so my question for you here is, how do you maintain, because it really is about maintaining this mindset of perseverance and tenacity. Do you have rituals, or do you have routines or things and people that keep you solid and grounded and able to show up every day, well, or most days, with the ability to continue to persevere?
I've had some great support from friends, key friends, family. Love where this is going. They love the body of a lot of the work, the video stuff that I've developed, the way that I'm able to convey the message, which they believe I've got a strong talent for. But, none of it matters unless you got passion and you work really hard. And the other part of it that really kept me aligned was it's just the strength of losing that twin, and I know that she's sitting back going, get it done, drive, move forward. And it's that resonating love. I was fortunate to come from a very good family. So, it's that aspect that really makes it much easier, because it's a tough game. It's Anthony Bourdain has got a great quote saying, basically, you're only one step away. And he's really right. And in the world of business, you're just one hit away from rocketing. But the key to get that hit is to not quit, whether it takes you 10 years, 3 years, 20, just don't quit. Mm-hmm. And it's something that resonates with me. And it is the support of who's around you too.
It is.
If I didn't have that support, and if I didn't have that inner belief, there's just no way I would have continued with it. Yeah. And I think of COVID and the challenge of COVID, partly what made COVID like a dress rehearsal for me is I'd already been through so much that what was catastrophic to a lot of people, to me, was like, all right, let's just get it done. Let's just regroup, retrain, and transform, because I also have a job at a hotel where I still bartend. It's part-time at the Marriott. I've been there a long time. At one point, it was a full-time job for me for quite a while. It's a great place to work, but everything there is scuttled too. So you're going through this process of dealing with family turmoil, serious loss, and then all of a sudden you have potentially serious economic loss looking at you, and a lot of free time. A lot of people just sat back, and they're, it's like crowd and crisis management. 10% of people act, and 90% do some form of standing around or panicking. And you don't get to choose who you are. It just sort of comes out as to who you are. And I'm just really lucky and really grateful I'm in that 10% bracket that just doesn't really get fazed by too much. I just get up and say, okay, situation's tough, but what are we going to do? Let's move forward. Let's just throw that football. As our friend Jennifer A. Garrett loves to say, just move the goal line.
Move the goal line. I love that you're part of that 10%, but I like to challenge that statement that you made. I think the other 90%, they can choose that.
Absolutely,
but it is gonna take effort and intention.
Yes. And I believe, and knowing yourself and knowing what's moving forward, and the message to people out there that are hesitant, and sadly most of the world's trained to be hesitant on this, is to let go of that and just jump forward. Take that leap. because that leap of faith, it's like the first time you jump off a diving board and you're just a little kid and you're like, oh my God, that's hell. And it probably took me about 5 times to actually gain that confidence to jump. Once you jump, you realize that wasn't so bad. That was actually quite easy.
Yeah,
And
it
the
was
landing
kind of
was pretty good.
And it was kind of
It was fun.
fun. And it was fun. We know that old that saying, there's no growth inside your comfort zone.
None.
And so, perfect example of that, right? And I had someone on my radio show a couple of weeks ago, and he said that unless you have a compelling reason to say no, say yes. I thought that was pretty good.
Yeah, and it's the only, I've heard that in a similar sense. It was sort of reversed, but it's might have been a gentleman I met on a cruise ship. You meet some interesting characters, and this gentleman was with his wife, and they bring 30 people on board. And it was the first ship I worked on as an art auctioneer. I remember now, it was in Alaska. Dreary run, a lot of fun for the first 2 weeks, and that becomes a tough place to be for 3 or 4 months. But he came on board and he said something sort of similar to that. He said that moving forward in that sense, it's about how you surround yourself, but it's also the purpose you find. Otherwise, people just don't do it.
Yeah.
Part of his purpose was being rekindled with what became his wife after World War II. And then they decided to set up a plant and a factory. And I can't remember what they manufactured, but they became multimillionaires out of it and retired. Mm-hmm. But it was part of that process of, you don't really know until you try.
Yeah.
And
Isn't
that's
that true?
The premise of where he came from, which really ties into all of this.
It sure does. There are a few P's that I want people to take away from the show here, 2 of which you shared, and then purpose you just threw in there. Passion, perseverance, and purpose. I think there's a lot that can be gained in one's life when you really channel those.
Yeah, and you're going to see a massive transformation.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it doesn't come right away financially, and we know in business, finances seem to be the last thing that comes. Anybody who's really wealthy will tell you it's the last thing that comes. There's effort, there's expense, there's marketing, there's always planning every day, trying to execute, trying new things. But all of that ties in. And as you said, the other 90% can learn to be in that 10% bracket. It's kind of a fault of the way we're conditioned and educated in our society. We're told that risks are bad, and going out of the comfort zone isn't good. And that's why we remember when we were young, it was always go to school, get your university degree, get a good job. Well, and the truth is that formula only works for a certain segment of society. And it works for the segment of society that lucks into a career or a field they like right from the get-go.
And what percentage of people do you know who achieve that? I don't know too many. Well, we're also wired. We're wired to conform. We're wired and built, and our culture perpetuates that, right? To conform.
That's very insightful. It's very true.
Well, this stuff fascinates me, right? We are herd animals. We're herd animals. That's why we exist.
We're pack animals. Yeah.
We're pack animals. That's why we're able to exist on this world this long. So we're not wired to step out of our comfort zone. And I think even knowing that is actually really interesting, because then there's nothing wrong with you that you feel uncomfortable with the idea. It's like, it's your wiring. So either are you going to just conform and just be a sheep, or are you going to decide to go for it? And in spite of the fear or the whatever feeling that you're feeling, are you going to take that leap and go for the possibilities? I think something like that can really change your perspective on your ability.
It's interesting. I've asked my uncles and my dad when he was still alive, my late father, and I started asking this question when, I got into my 30s and they were into their 60s. So I knew that they were at the end of their career lives, not their physical lives, but their career lives were over. And I said to my uncle Alec on the Guyanese side of my family, and my mother's from Guyana, South America. So he had a different challenge because he emigrated here too. And they always asked you where your Canadian experience and other nonsense like this was, and bias and crap, outright crap, really. Yeah. But he persevered through it. And I asked him, and I asked my dad, who was a career military officer, and I said, would you guys ever work for someone long-term again, knowing what you know now? And they both looked at me and they said, no. It wasn't even a hesitant answer. It was reflexive. And I've asked that question to numerous older people at the end of their careers because it teaches us a lot moving forward as younger people, and something we can impart to the generation that's younger than us. Mm-hmm. Pursue what you love, and pursue it with purpose and unrelenting passion. And who cares how many times you trip, because you're going to get up and eventually just run, or you're going to get on that bicycle and take off with it. And it's something that resonated with me because I was always a bit of a maverick and a non-conventionalist, even as a child. I never liked to conform. I didn't like cliques. I thought social cliques were a joke because it limited you socially as to who you could explore and be friends with. And that expanded into workplaces. When I got into workplaces, often what was the disappointment in the end, even I look at the cruise line industry, which has a ton of really cool things about it. The one hard part in the end is you're always answering to somebody else's vision. Mm-hmm. You're not answering to your own. Mm-hmm. And I thought about it, and everything's about conformity. And even in the workplace, and we've all encountered this, it's like when a bad rule comes along and you're like, everybody knows it's a bad rule, but they just conform. And I challenge anyone listening to this, quit conforming in your own day-to-day life. Take the challenge and explore yourself, because I think you're going to be blown away by what you discover.
Oh, what an awesome challenge, and what an awesome note to end the show on. That was amazing. Before we go, Rob, how can people find you? What's the best way for them to inquire about your services, how they can learn more, how they can engage, how they can get your videos, how they can hire you? What's the best method?
Well, they can email me directly at info@thedrunkengreat.com. That's the business channel. That's where all the inquiries open up. So it's quite straightforward. They can approach me directly on social media. I mean, I do have a website as well. It's the www.thedrunkengreat.com. So it's pretty straightforward. And I also own the .ca. So if they punch that in Canada, it's just going to get redirected anyway. But LinkedIn's a great place to find me, as is Facebook. I do have a Facebook business page where messages will come through, and they can just hit me directly. And I think that's the beauty of social media today. Couldn't imagine trying to do this 30 years ago, where we would have to rely on print advertising, radio, and television broadcasting, and we'd have to pay for airtime. It would make so much of what we're able to do now, especially with the internet and computing and social media, it just makes it infinitesimally easier than what it would have been 30 years ago. It just wouldn't. You and I probably would have spent about $300,000 just to get where we are now, if not more, just on advertising.
I just don't.
So it's beautiful. They can get a hold of me through these mediums, which is fantastic.
Absolutely. It makes things possible that may have been impossible for others. Certainly for me, it certainly has made a lot
as
more
is
possible.
For me, and as is for probably a huge part of our connection list that we know in business conjointly. I mean, these terrific people in leadership and coaching, or whether they're in health and beauty and product sales, or financial sales, or wine. You can bring. It gives you the ability to bring everything to life.
It does. Oh, what a great way of saying it. I can't tell you, Rob, how much I appreciate you spending this time.
I love being here. This is great.
That's awesome. Awesome. It was a joy. I loved hearing about the goddess of beer and all of your little history snippets that I did not know about. And of course, as always, just for being you and for spending this time with me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Louise. No, it was awesome. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And of course, thanks to all of you as well for tuning into today's show. And I invite you to contact me directly at louisehreed.com if you have any questions or want to talk about coaching, speaking engagements, or leadership consulting. The coordinates for how you can reach Rob will be in the show notes, so please make sure you check those out. Let's all live inspired, grow together, and be brave, be bold, and be happy. And in the words of our guest today, Rob, pursue what you love with unrelenting passion. I'm Louise H. Reed, wishing all of you an amazing day. And until next week, stay well. Goodbye, my friends.